What's good, friends? List episode 74 of the Gamecast coming at you. Gaming produces some of the most passionate fan bases in entertainment and art, both from those who create them and play them. But sometimes that can go a little too far, specifically when it comes to console wars and the sometimes childish takes that come with them. Phil Spencer thinks that same tribalism could be one of gaming's biggest issues right now. So, this week, we examine just why this hateful position in gaming even still exists, why it's so commonly confused with good competition, and why continued success from all hardware manufacturers is a good thing. Plus, Xbox game streaming has been cemented officially for a few months now, but it doesn't look like expansion to new platforms is off the table, even when it comes to smart TV apps. Could this platform be a boon for Microsoft when it eventually comes out, even as soon as in the next 12 months? Or will more hardware options akin to that of an Amazon Fire Stick be a better long-term option? Also, the Game Awards nominees have been officially announced, and a few Xbox titles made their way into the spotlight, specifically Ori and the Will of the Wisp. But what about major titles who missed the mark of release due to the early nature of nominee submission, such as Cyberpunk 2077? Would it be more logical to fit all of the current year's nominations into the actual current year by moving the event to January? Or does the December cap still feel like the best option? All of this and much more on the newest jam-packed episode of the Game Pass Gamecast.
Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You're violating the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz I tell you every week. Just go over there, wherever you get a podcast at. Follow us on there. It helps us out a lot, to be honest, especially the rating. We need some reviews and ratings. You know, I've seen a slow trickle of those coming in recently. We need a few more. Bump us up, you know. Give us a nice little over the pants style thing, you know.
Over the pants review.
Right, exactly. That everybody loves that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's consensual. All that jazz. Wherever you get a podcast at, follow us, do all that jazz. And speaking of follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways like our Cyberpunk 2077 giveaway that we're doing right now. Just click the link down in the description. You can get entered. It's real simple. You got to follow us, unfortunately, but, you know, you fucking win some, you lose some, I guess. Anyways, I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Travis, on most internet platforms. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Mike P-Pack. Mike, what's good? What's going on? And how has that grind session been in MCC, man?
It has been
like, it's respectable. The past couple days that I've gotten on, like, just whether it's working from home or getting on the play, you've been playing, and I respect the fuck out of it.
Yeah, I've been trying to get into shape. I have a tournament on Sunday, a draft style format tournament, and I was a first round pick, so I'm expected to perform.
Now let me ask you this just before you continue. You being a fan, how many times during this whole process have you listened to Hearts on Fire?
I actually haven't yet. I haven't listened to that one yet. Maybe I should mix that with the rotation.
I was gonna say that's a game day song, maybe.
Yeah,
match day song, you know.
That might be day of, just because.
Hearts on Fire.
Exactly, and being a first round pick, you kind of have to live up to some big expectations. You kind of have to be, you know, the captain's, you know, the best player on the team, and then being a first round pick, it's kind of up to me to kind of help him out throughout the entire day. And it's going to be a long process. We got 22 teams drafted, so it's going to be a long day. A couple of the pre-tournament brackets a couple people have us playing or have us winning. So kind of a little bit of pressure to live up to there, especially as a first round pick. So just been getting the work in, trying to, you know, get my reps in and take care of business. As of last night, it was our first practice as a team. I'd say it probably went about, it was probably like honest rating. It's probably like a B, I would say, out of what it could have been. So not horrible. but yeah, I mean, just a little bit of room to grow before Sunday, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Now, who is this tournament through? Is it
Uh,
through like, is it a grassroots one that's HCS is at least attaching their name to? Is it a Penn Halo thing or?
yeah, it's 100% Penn Halo, so it is grassroots, but it's not like HC. It's not technically like they're not technically an HCS grassroots program,
Okay.
so it's through Penn Halo, which is basically like a smaller tournament organizer,
Hmm.
which is awesome. And the
Right.
guys over at Penn Halo are really great. They've been doing a lot of stuff as far as getting tournaments together. They were running 2v2s. They have done 2 draft tournaments before this one, so they've been doing a lot to try to keep Halo alive as an esport,
Hmm.
as much as they can. So shout out to those guys. They've been great, and yeah, just excited to see what happens and how their growth goes, because at 22 teams, this is the biggest draft tournament they've had as an organizer, which is cool to see that type of scene growing. And it's worth noting that draft tournaments are interesting because they do run HCS tournaments on Friday nights, but most of those teams are already organized and they're already,
Hmm.
some of the best teams win. The best team pretty much wins every week, right? Where the
Hmm.
draft tournament, you kind of mix all those teams up. You mix some of the better players with some of the, some worse players in the community, some amateur players. So it's really cool in that regard that everyone kind of is on the same slate and has kind of a similar chance, if you will. But it's just nice to see some of the better players intermingle with the worst players, because it's no secret the better competition you play, the better you get. So
Hmm.
hopefully a lot of the amateur players get a lot better after these experiences, because you kind of have to coach some of the worst players on the team. Like, for instance, our fourth round pick, our last pick, he's a decent player. He can shoot his gun and everything, but he doesn't quite understand the concept of playing the game yet.
Hmm.
So it's something that, that's kind of something you have to work with. And it's something that, the amateur players that are in the tournament will get exposure to. And it's important that, the captain and myself as a first round pick kind of takes the reins as trying to walk some of those players through playing the game in a more efficient manner and playing better. So hopefully the amateur players that do get exposed to that type of gameplay will, take the lessons and learn from it.
No, definitely, and it's good you say that because I kind of had that lesson over the past couple years, maybe like 4 or 5 years, playing any kind of competitive game. Like back in the day, like mostly I would always feel super intimidated to get into any kind of like either whether it's like ranked, competitive, skill based matchmaking, anything like that, where it's more pressure's more on, and not that I'm afraid of like playing in situations like that, but like I always was more I'm gonna fuck up, and that it is like I'm just gonna embarrass myself type of thing. But like I've started like even just now, like when I play battle royale games, for example, like when I'm playing solo anymore, like I just hot drop. I put myself in those situations because the only like way that you get better at playing games like that is actually pushing yourself and like being in competitive situations, actually getting in situations that aren't necessarily holding your hand all the way through. That
Right.
you're only going to learn whenever sometimes you're only going to learn whenever you actually get to an abrasive sandpaper position, that you're going to learn and actually improve your reflexes. You're going to learn, okay, when I get in a gunfight like this, X, Y, and Z is going to happen because I've been in that situation to know it happens. Because if I haven't, how the fuck am I going to know? And yeah, you're going to probably get dicked on a couple of times, but you know what? Like, you then learn how to do it and you learn how to adjust. I mean, that me playing CS, like that was the whole thing. Like, after a while, like when I first started playing CS, and actually, like when I got a good gaming computer, like, 4 or 5 years ago, or whenever it was, like, and actually started to, now that I could play CS at a decent presentation level, like I was like, okay, I want to actually try to like learn how to like play competitively, or like how to actually play the game the correct way. And
Sure.
like getting in those situations, like the first month, it's like you were just going to get shit on every single day until you
Yep.
start learning. Like you're learning how to use A&D strafing, learning how to walk, learning how to, if you have an AK, it's a one tap. Like just learning those things and putting yourself in those situations that you're only going to learn. Like it sucks. You're going to get beat down a little, but every day it's a little bit, it gets a little better. It's another step. And games like Halo and like CS and things like that that are so much more, in my opinion, unforgiving than some of your modern Twitch shooters and things like that. It's I don't think a lot of people necessarily learn that right away. And I
Yeah,
think that hurts a lot of, newer modern first person shooters, in my opinion, though.
I think also, you made very good points regarding like hot drops and BRs and things of that nature.
Hmm.
Like that's all very good points because I feel like, you might, drop somewhere that's more safe and you might spend a lot of your time looting, but when it gets to that late game
Hmm.
situation, it's a high pressure cooker type
Yeah.
situation where there's a lot going on, right? But if you're hot dropping and getting used to it, I think it makes it a lot easier once you get to that late game situation when you're a hot drop person and you're always exposing yourself to that.
Hmm.
Because if you end up in late game situation and you're not used to high pressure situations, you're going to choke the late game situation a lot more. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And I totally agree with that, especially like battle royales. I remember when PUBG like first kind of came out and battle royales, like, and granted H1Z1 was out at that point and whatnot, but when battle royales really started to take off with PUBG, I remember like first handful of games just like dropping and hiding because I didn't know how to play BR games, and I was like, shit, I don't know how to play this. I don't know how to do this. But then after a while, I'm like, fuck it, I'm just gonna start hot dropping because at least then I get experience getting in these gunfights and feeling how guns shoot in this game, feeling how movement is, feeling how actual just combat situations will play out. Because if I'm just fucking sitting in a corner the whole time and getting cheap kills left and right, yeah, I may get later into the game or whatever, but like it's fucking boring, one. And two, like I'm gonna be cold as shit whenever somebody actually does come towards me. My reflexes aren't gonna be, I'm not gonna be as on top of, perspective wise of what's going on. So uh, it's I fear for a lot of modern shooters. I mean, it's great to see games like Valorant and things like that keep, tactical shooters alive, and games that maybe do have a higher learning curve but are very rewarding once you start actually investing in the meta and what's going on in the game. But I do fear for some of those games like a Call of Duty and, Warzone, or, even Apex to a degree, and Apex is a little bit better because Respawn's fucking great and they do a lot of great gunplay with their design, but where sometimes it is a little more random than other games. But I digress. On my end, though, Mike, before we get too long in the tooth, it was funny. I had plans to come into this show this week, figuring I'm going to be coming in. I'm going to be talking about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I wrapped up, and like as I always say, was playing something on PS4. I'll tell you, but I'm not going to dive into it. I finished Miles Morales, got the platinum in that, and that was like the first one big thing I wanted to do with next gen, because I love that universe so much. But I was excited because I'm like, cool, now I get to dive into AC Valhalla. That's going to be the big meaty game for a while until obviously like Cyberpunk or something drops like that. But while playing that game the whole time, and I only probably put like 2 hours into it, maybe a little bit more than that. The whole time I'm playing it, I just kept thinking, man, this is really good. I like what they're doing. It just makes me want to play The Witcher, and it makes me realize how good CD Projekt Red was at doing what AC Valhalla is pretty much mimicking. I mean, it's, and that's not any knock against AC Valhalla. That means that Ubisoft Montreal, like, they put out a product that is ridiculously good, ridiculously polished comparative to previous Assassin's Creed, in my opinion. That it's an experience that is built for next gen. But whenever I'm playing it, the whole time I'm thinking, man, I love some of these side quests. I love some of the, in what little time I did play, man, I really enjoy this, but I know I'd probably enjoy it more in The Witcher because they did this a little bit better. There's a little bit more polish with this. There's a little bit more depth with this. So it kind of made me want to dive back into The Witcher 3. And I didn't start a new playthrough because that's like a 50-hour commitment, and I don't want to necessarily be burnt out by open world games by the time Cyberpunk rolls around. But and I knew too, hey, we're gonna have some time off from work with Thanksgiving and whatnot, and it sounds like we're gonna end up potentially kind of shutting down again with our state and whatnot, with how cases are ramping back up. So we're gonna be inside a lot more. I'm like, it's a good time to go back and do the DLC for The Witcher and go through and do the Hearts of Stone expansion and Blood and Wine expansion, which I've never done, but I've heard ridiculously good things. A lot of people even say this is like pretty much a whole second game with these, like with the length of them and what you get out of it. I mean, the main stories alone, I think I looked it up last night because I was just curious, but Hearts of Stone, which is the first one that I've started into, it's only about 10 hours, but Blood and Wine is about 20. And those are just for the main stories. There's, additional side quests and things like that. So I started doing that, and man, that game just, if there's one thing I hope with Cyberpunk, because Cyberpunk definitely is going to be a larger experience, it's going to be a more in-depth experience, which is great, and I like that a lot. But my thing with open worlds is that I get at times is sometimes quantity over quality. And you know me, Mike, and you too to a degree, obviously. I think with the modern take of them right now, I'm a little bit more forgiving with them, but Bethesda, for the longest time, Morrowind, even Oblivion, all of the stuff that you did in there felt purposeful. When we started to get into Skyrim and we started to get into Fallout 4 and things like that,
Felt grindy.
It felt grindy and it felt bloated and it felt much more kind of like meh. Like the whole premise of Skyrim was there's infinite quests. The Radiant quest system, like there will always be quests to do. Well, yeah, but they're all kind of the fucking same. Like, there's no depth to it, and not that I don't enjoy those games, because I do. I love Bethesda still, and I think out of our whole group, I'm much more forgiving and much more invested in their system or in their games still. But in terms of a modern take, we're talking post Fallout 3 type of thing. But the one thing that CD Projekt Red does with The Witcher, which has opened my eyes over the past year or so, when I finally got hooked into the game, because I've tried multiple times because I love fantasy RPGs, and finally it hooked me after 4 years trying to play this game last year. None of your time is wasted in that game. Everything you do has a purpose, and everything you do makes meaningful progression to whether it is a side quest, whether it is, just doing monster hunts or doing, going to the quest board that's outside of an inn and picking up some job listings and stuff like that. Everything you have plays into a bigger picture, which I appreciate more than most modern open world games in general, and especially open world RPGs. And I mean, it's such a stark, contrast coming from, just replaying Fallout 4 and going into a game like this where I'm looking at it saying, okay, cool. Fallout 4, obviously a much less polished experience, but I still love Fallout 4. I love what it did in terms of, I like the linearity of the story a little bit more, because sometimes I think comparative to Elder Scrolls, I feel more purpose when playing an Elder Scrolls game than a Fallout game. Fallout games are a little more open-ended, which I appreciate, but that's one thing which a lot of people didn't like. I liked with Fallout 4 was it was a little more linear to a degree, but going from playing that and going through all of the bloat and going through and getting things that felt just so meaningful were just I'm just going through to get this, to get a skill point, or just to do this, yada yada. And there is some grinding in The Witcher, but it's very minimal, and it usually leads to much more bigger progression things. So overall, I'm fucking enjoying it. Granted, I've only probably put 3 or 4 hours into it just because I've been playing other stuff with you guys and, just doing other stuff, some graphic design projects and things like that. And obviously playing stuff on consoles as well, trying to get my money's worth out of these next-gen consoles. So, but man, it's just such a fucking great game. And I'm so excited that it's got its hooks in me again. And I'm hoping, obviously it doesn't lead to burnout whenever Cyberpunk comes around. But it's just so refreshing to have a game. And that's the one thing I hope with just open world games moving forward. And I hope Cyberpunk coming out and pushing the medium forward in terms of specifically open world RPGs to say, and I hope they do this because we don't know yet, but from all intentions, it sounds like from early impressions and previews and stuff that it is in the same vein of The Witcher, that everything you do has a purpose. Like they're saying, one dev has been playing the game for 175 hours now and they still haven't beat it. So and that's a whole other thing that I'm like, that's a lot of fucking time. I don't know if I'm gonna do that, but I'd like to go outside at some point. But knowing that if that all has some kind of purpose to it, that's appreciative to me, and I just hope that that's gonna push competition within the medium to say, okay, the next Assassin's Creed, we need to do that. we need to do this. We need to make sure everything we do leads back into a bigger picture or a bigger purpose. So I'm ecstatic with that, but I can go on all day talking about that shit. So before we do that though, and before we get into our big topics, Mike, let's go through Button Mash, talk some of our quick hit news articles. If you're new to the show, each week we go through and run through some of the quick hit stuff before we get into our big topics of the week. So kicking it off, Marvel's Avengers sales, which has been a big topic of discussion given Miles Morales is out now, doing absolutely phenomenal numbers. Unfortunately, not the same for Marvel's Avengers, which sales have been lower than expected, and the game hasn't yet recouped its development costs, unfortunately, leading to an estimated 7 billion yen, which is approximately $67 million USD operating loss in Square Enix's HD Games segment during the last financial quarter. Company president Yosaki Matsui explained in a newly translated results briefing, quote, "Sales of Marvel's Avengers were lower than we had expected and unable to completely offset the amortization of the game's development costs." Game analysis David Gibson previously explained that the company sold 60% of its planned units and that the numbers implied the game cost around $100 million to make. That's fucking nuts. It's somebody, just kind of a little anecdote, somebody who played the game literally only played the campaign because I felt no drive to go back into the actual Destiny as games as a service end, because I'll just go and play Destiny if I want to do that, even though I adore Marvel characters and Marvel comics and whatnot. But that is a lot of money to lose out.
Yeah.
Anyways, though, Bethesda, just talking about them, has launched the Fallout 76 Steel Dawn update early, which was a big thing for 76, which I've heard great things about 76 recently. Like, it's really starting to turn it around. Granted, that may be, you can only go up from rock bottom type of thing, but hey, it is what it is. But I've heard good things about it recently. So their newest update, the Steel Dawn update, which kind of centers around the Brotherhood of Steel from Fallout 4 and whatnot, did come out early after a glitch allowed Xbox players to download the update ahead of schedule. In a post on the Fallout blog, Bethesda explained that the Steel Dawn update was originally scheduled to go live on December 1st across all platforms, but the Brotherhood of Steel themed expansion is available now for all platforms following the mistake. Essentially, players on Xbox platforms could download Steel Dawn, but it meant that this prevented them from playing the rest of the game. Bethesda was actively investigating the issue before making this decision. A standalone version of Red Dead Online, shout out to Mike Collins and Shay, I know they both play that a lot, has been announced. So players can take part in the online game without purchasing Red Dead Redemption 2. It normally costs $20, but will be discounted to just $5 from the launch date, which is December 1st, 2020, until February 15th, 2021. Console versions will require Xbox Live Gold or PlayStation Plus if you're playing on PlayStation, and versions will come to Rockstar Games Launcher at Epic Games and Steam. The standalone version of Red Dead Online will require up to 123 gigabytes of space and will include an option to unlock Red Dead Redemption 2's story mode via in-game paid unlock. Fortnite is starting up a monthly subscription service with the arrival of Chapter 2 Season 5. Dubbed Fortnite Crew, players can sign up for the $11.99 a month subscription fee to gain unique perks and benefits beyond just purchasing a new battle pass every season. Fortnite Crew will launch on December 2nd, the same day as Season 5. As a monthly subscription, the $11.99 cost will be recurring, but each month players will get a series of bonuses, including exclusives. Subscription members will get Battle Pass for the full season. Members will have access to the current season's Battle Pass, 1,000 V-Bucks each month, and a monthly crew pack, which subscribers will get an exclusive Fortnite crew pack each month with an always new outfit bundle and things like that. The first known existence of a leaked final version of Cyberpunk 2077's gameplay has appeared, just talking about them. Per users on Reset Era, streamers broadcast around 20 minutes of the game's Nomad life path from the beginning of the PS4 version of the game, which has now been taken down in multiple locations though. It's confirmation that unpatched copies of the final game are beginning to make their way into players' hands. While we broadly know the beats of the beginning of the game due to various official previews, the stream is a sign that we may begin to see more meaningful spoilers emerge ahead of the game's launch on December 10th. So, PSA, If you don't want to know what happens in Cyberpunk 2077, don't fucking go looking. Don't type in Cyberpunk 2077 ending or some shit like that. Just don't search it. You already seen enough fucking trailers and shit like that. You know what you're getting into. The game's been in development for 8 fucking years. Just play it. Just wait in December 10th if you don't want to be spoiled. I don't want to hear anyone, "Oh man, I can't believe I got spoiled after typing in Cyberpunk 2077 secret ending blah blah blah" or something. Like, okay, what? Anyways, I digress. Mike Laidlaw, the former creative director of Dragon Age, has established a new development studio alongside other industry veterans. Called Yellow Brick Games, the independent studio is located in Quebec City and aims to create, quote, original new games of high quality. Laidlaw is joined by Thomas Giroux, Jeff Saliski, and Frederick St. Laurent B., meaning the studio is comprised of EA, BioWare, and Ubisoft veterans with a body of work covering Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Watch Dogs, and Assassin's Creed. Outer Wilds and Sayonara, if I can say that right, holy shit. Sayonara Wild Hearts publisher Annapurna Interactive has confirmed that 3 of its planned 2020 games have slipped into 2021. The Artful Escape, 12 Minutes, and Last Stop will now launch in 2021 instead of the broad 2020 release window that was initially planned. The publisher revealed the news on Twitter, explaining that the developers are just refining the games as we speak. Quote, "We're looking at 2021 now as they all get closer to getting ready," the tweet said. Quote, "They've all come together throughout this year and it's pretty much polishing at this point," which is big to note because 12 Minutes is an Xbox console exclusive that is coming out, which is the one with James McAvoy, Daisy Ridley, and Willem Dafoe in it, voicing it. And it's the one where you kind of repeat like the pretty much the death of your wife, I think it is, that for every 12 minutes you have to figure out how to, stop it from happening type of thing. It looks really sweet. It's one of those interesting indie games that popped out that instantly grabs you and you're like, whoa, okay, that's different than everything else out there. So really excited for that. Sucks it's going to 2021. And finally, the upcoming Xbox exclusive first-person shooter Crossfire X has been delayed to 2021. It was originally slated to launch sometime in 2020. Unsurprisingly, though, the delay is attributed to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, as the development team at Smilegate have faced challenges developing remotely, according to a recent tweet. Which is important to note that Remedy, the people behind the development studio, behind Control, Alan Wake, all that, they are working on the single-player campaign of that, which is really exciting to note. So this is all, kind of tied into that. It sucks to see it's bumped, but it is what it is given everything going on. So Mike, after running through all that, anything you want to run back before we head into our big topics this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm actually kind of surprised that it took Fortnite as long as it did to kind of go to a game of service type thing. So that might sound off a few alarms for some people. Kind of what it might mean to me, I would look at it as like potentially they're not generating the revenue off the skins and things of that nature that they once were. So now they need to look for alternative means of revenue, or their skin sales are fine, just like they always have been, and they just feel like this might be the right time to, release a pay type subscriptions like type structure, which I mean, we've kind of talked about it on this show a lot. For a free game, I don't think it's too much to ask for $11.99 a month if you're going to get a bunch of stuff out of it. But again, that's my opinion on it. You can't just have games that are completely free to play. It doesn't work like that. Another thing that I think is important is the leaked final version of Cyberpunk 2077 is a huge deal. It means that we're getting closer to that release date being on time, especially if there's leaked versions of the final game. That's a huge deal. Obviously, you hate to you hate to see something like this that they've worked so hard on get leaked, but it's part of the industry and it's natural, and I don't condone that type of behavior. But at the same time, it gives I think it'll give most people kind of a peace of mind knowing that the game is probably going to come out as expected, at least close on time. And then I think that's. Oh no! I also wanted to talk about the Dragon Age mashup with or called Yellow Brick Games, where it's a bunch of the devs of like Mass Effect, Dragon Age, those games. I think that's something that people, from the surface, you might think big whoop, but a lot of those games are some of the most important RPGs, of at least definitely. Maybe not this past generation, because it's going to be weird to talk about the Xbox One generation as last gen. You know what I mean?
Oh,
It still feels
100%.
like it's this gen, but I'm talking about like the Xbox 360 generation. You know, some of those games that these people have worked on, they have serious, you know, credence and serious resume, because some of those games are hugely important RPGs to the entire realm of that genre. So I think, you know, whatever they're going to be working on is going to be, you know, worthwhile, and I can't wait to see what they do put together. That's really exciting to me.
Hmm. No, definitely. And I love whenever you see industry veterans like that kind of, and I don't want to say, you know, I don't want to speak out of turn, I guess, in terms of these bigger publishers, because we've seen more publishers start to give creative freedoms now that all of them really have gotten to this just absolute next stratosphere of income from gaming, just completely bursting over the seams at this point, with so many people gaming and so much money coming into gaming now, that we've seen now, hey, we could take more creative liberties and whatnot. But it is always nice to see, you know, industry veterans like this kind of set out on their own, kind of set out to
Hmm.
do their own thing and not have to worry about, hey, we don't have to worry about, we may at, you know, being tied to different entities where, hey, you know, we may, you know, say BioWare, hey, we want to do this in Anthem and we want to do it like this. Okay, yeah, we do have, you know, a lot of freedom, but if it comes to monetary things, we got to clear it with EA, we got to clear it with this, we got to, you know, they got to sign off on it. You know, and two, the pressure from shareholders alone, for a lot of these are publicly traded companies. Now they don't have to worry about that. They're mostly going to be private companies who, you know, these development studios. So, or indie development studios, I should say. So it is refreshing to see that. I always love kind of seeing that in the industry whenever you're seeing confidence enough to go out on your own and do what. I already kind of talked about the 12 minutes part, but that really, it sucks. But at the same time, that's one of those games that I'm super. It's probably my most anticipated indie game right now, I would say, tentatively. So I'm super excited to get into that game and jump into that game. Anything Annapurna touches, for the most part, is fucking golden. If any of you guys listening have never played an Annapurna published game, please do. Just literally go on their site, look at them. There, you could throw a dart and it'll fucking probably land on something that is at least above average. So,
Yeah.
so I'm really excited about it, and Adam can attest to that. I'm sure he'll gush over that whenever, you know, we have him on the show next. But the one thing I did want to mention too, you brought up about V-Bucks too. It's important to note that for $8 itself, you get 1,000 V-Bucks right now. I thought it was
Hmm.
somewhere around there. I couldn't remember if it was 10 or I knew it was right around there. But so you got to think too, if you're already spending $8 a month, say on V-Bucks to get 1,000 V-Bucks. Okay, you spend another $4, you're getting a skin pack, you're getting the battle pass. Like that is, if you're somebody who Fortnite is in your stable of, you know, games, say, you know, hey, I play my single player games, I play this, but I also, like, for multiplayer, I mostly just play Fortnite or I play Warzone or something like that. Like, to me, that is such a good investment long term. Like, one, you're saying, if you know you're going to continually play this game, you live, you know, this is one of your main stable games that you play consistently, and you put, you know, 100 hours a year or something in, and that's not even that much for a lot of people. But point being, like, you play a lot of this game throughout the year. Yeah, that's a no brainer for you to buy that and spend, you know, sure, it's 100 and what? It's going to be like $130 at the end of the year, but that's two games. If you're playing that game that you're getting for free already, that's a no-brainer, and you're getting a ton of
Hmm.
content out of that. That's like, I'm with you. Any game that puts out like that, like if it's a free-to-play game and it's actually worth, you know, I go through and I'm having a great time with it, and it's from a development studio that is truly listening to what, you know, their audience is wanting. They're open for, you know, open with their communication and whatnot, and like, I'm totally cool with supporting them. I've gotten, you know, say I get 40 hours out of a game that's free to play. Cool. I have no problem tossing them $5 to get a skin or something like that, or, you know, $10 to get a battle pass or something like that. That I'm getting more content out because
Hmm.
it only benefits them in the long run. Now that Bungie is away from Activision, I've been super eager to give them money. Like, when I eventually have time, I'm going to buy Beyond Light, the expansion. Like, I bought the upgrade edition for when it came to Steam, and got, you know, Shadowkeep and whatnot like that. Like, that game is awesome, and I love Bungie for so long, like you, and, you know, it's great to see them move away from Activision now, knowing that they're independently run and independently funding this game. Like, cool, I know that money is going to developers, and I've been playing this game for free. Hell yeah, I'll give them $20 or whatever. Like, you know, that I want to support creative people doing good things without, and especially if it isn't having the corporate overlords hanging over it. I'm totally all on that. That is all good with me. So, Mike, send to our big topics for this week. This one's kind of pulling off of the next two articles we read are technically pulling from the same interview, but they definitely kind of pull into two different ends of the spectrum for conversation. But I think it's important to kind of separate the two and kind of each have them talk on their own. So before I ramble on too much about that, let's head into our first one here. Xbox head Phil Spencer says console tribalism is, quote, one of the worst things for our industry. This comes from Megan Farkamesh via The Verge, as always, link in the description. Microsoft and Sony are often considered direct rivals in the game space, competing for players through new consoles and exclusive games. Brand loyalty and, quote, console wars for some players dictate whether they'll grab a PlayStation or Xbox. Extreme fans have even escalated their affinity for one over the other into harassment, but Microsoft's real threat isn't Sony, Nintendo, or any other company, says Microsoft's head of gaming Phil Spencer. Quote, we're in the entertainment business. The biggest competitor we have is apathy over the products and services, games that we build, he says. Speaking to The Verge, Spencer says he finds toxic brand loyalty to be distasteful and despises the idea that companies like Microsoft, quote, have to see others fail in order to achieve their goals. Quote, that tribalism in the industry, if there was anything that would ever drive me out of the industry, it's actually that, Spencer says. Quote, when a team releases something into the market for the world to tear it apart on the internet, it's just such a brave thing for a team to do. I'm never going to vote against any creative team or any product team to do poorly because I have a competitive product. It's not in me. I don't actually think it helps us in the long run in the industry. Instead, Spencer says it's more important to focus on how the industry is doing well as a whole. He points to advancements like crossplay, where players can jump into the same game with friends on any console, as ways the company has worked against these tropes of bitter competition. Quote, but there is a core that just really hates the other consumer product, Spencer says. Man, that's just so off-putting to me. To me, it's one of the worst things about our industry. So, we like to champion, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, Mike, whenever I say we like to champion the idea that is pretty simple. Fuck console wars. And I've had people come at my throat online and shit like that, like some of our, listeners or whatever. I wouldn't even call them that because, to be honest, I put out the content for the people who, what our audience. I don't go to appease everybody I like with our content. I want the people who fuck with us. I don't care if our audience is small. I'm happy for them that they're getting good content out for us. Like, I want to go to bat for them, not necessarily the bigger picture. But I digress. I've had people come at my throat for this when I post, like, for Avengers, for example. I picked it up on PS4 when it came out because I fucking wanted to play as Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. Like, I want to play with him, and if I can't play him on Xbox or PC or whatever, cool. The game's eventually going to go crossplay, so it doesn't fucking matter. Like, so if I want to try Spider-Man whenever he eventually comes out for free, yeah, I have the game, I could pop it in, boom. But I've had people come at my throat being like, you're not a real Xbox fan, you're not. Dude, like, I fucking play on every single console. Like, who the fuck cares what you play on? Anyways, but I think with this whole conversation, I think Phil really hits the nail on the head with this. That this tribalistic take on gaming is just fucking dumb and always will be. But it's important to note that it's not to say that competition isn't good, and that's where I think people get confused. Pushing each other to be better and evolve their products and what they offer and continue to push the medium forward that benefits consumers, that only benefits both parties in the long run. That only benefits, Xbox doing well only benefits Sony doing well because it's going to force them to do better things. It's going to force them to improve on what they have. Both of them doing good is going to force Nintendo to do their thing and improve what they do. Same with PC gaming and same with Steam and Valve. When Epic came in, you started to see Steam start to, change things up a little bit and start to, when they started seeing more exclusives leave and, big money exclusives like Borderlands and things like that, like, okay, well, now we gotta, maybe we should go back and look at, kind of go back to the drawing board on some things. So it's only good in the long run for everyone involved. So, Mike, how could this conversation around console war bullshit, I'm just going to call it, change, if at all, I guess, really? How can it just change the narrative with everything? And do you think that really too what I was thinking, like the rise again of mainstream PC gaming, where PC gaming is starting to become like, hey, yeah, I just buy all my games on PC and I have a console on the side to play something if I want to play it on my TV, but I mainly play on PC. You're seeing more and more of those people come up. Do you think a lot of this conversation on console wars could just naturally diminish as, you know, more of those people who invest in the PC gaming sphere continue to rise?
Yeah, I think, the growth of PC gaming, the growth of popularity
Mhm.
is, I think it's something that could really end this. Having people like Phil Spencer come out and, call out the bullshit is important as well. But I also think it's on gamers themselves. It's kind of our responsibility to kind of not patrol or gatekeep or do anything of that nature, but just to like
Mm-mm.
basically let everyone know, like, regardless of what console I have, I'm still going to support the other console, because at the end of the day, like you said, competition is what breeds excellence. Like, that's just something that's, important, is being able to judge yourself from other entities or competitors in this case. And at the end of the day, if I think a PlayStation game is very good and I want to experience it, then I'm going to go out of my way to go, either get a PS5 or 4 or borrow you or Adams or play it at
Mhm.
you or Adams. Like, I'm going to find a way to play it, even if it means me having to purchase it. And while I don't foresee myself buying both consoles this generation, just for my heavy investment in my PC I made this year. Like, I already spent $1,300 on an item this year for
Mhm.
gaming. Like, not counting all my video games and stuff. Like, that's a lot for me to kind of budget, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
I think that's super important, is we remember all these types of things, and we're still in the midst of a pandemic. I know some people like to, especially in our country here in America, like to pretend like it's not a thing anymore, but it's a lot worse than it ever has been in America as far as numbers and cases and things of that nature. And,
Mhm.
people are still struggling mightily with the financial burden that a
Oh yeah.
pandemic brings upon them. So, I still think that people are still going to be competitive about their games, because at the end of the day, there's still going to be awesome third party games that, we love or other people love in particular. And you're going to argue what's better. But I think we're getting further away from pitting console v console. I think
I
we're getting
agree.
closer to a unified sphere, and I think it's a lot of it is to kind of thank, you could kind of thank some of the game devs, because they're starting to do crossplay, and I think
Mhm.
that's a huge part of it. Is we haven't seen crossplay like this before. I mean, we did, you and I have, because if you played um the demo slash beta to Shadowrun back in the day, you could play with PC players,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like that kind of crossplay happened before. But as far as PlayStation, Xbox, and PC players all on the same servers, that's relatively new, and that's a huge part of kind of ending this like battle.
Mhm. No, definitely. I totally agree with all that. That, you know, you're starting to see, and I think the conversation is starting to potentially move away. And I definitely think it's because you're starting to see too, like, I think just in general with the rise of social media, it's bringing out the best on both ends. Where sure, you're going to now hear everybody has a soapbox to stand on, everyone has a platform to stand on that they can spew their hateful bullshit or their good bullshit that they put out. You know, and I say bullshit in a just a random adjective to it, a descriptor, I guess. But you know, you will get
It's
the hate.
pretty
You
it's
get the
pretty on point though.
no, 100%. And you get the hateful bullshit in, you know, an IGN tweet or something about, hey, The Last of Us was nominated, Last of Us Part 2 was nominated for 11, you know, awards at the Game Awards, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Not The Last of Us, but the Game Awards in a little bit. But you see some of that, and just because, you know, straight white males have an issue with seeing women in a prominent position, or just people being, you know, having a same sex relation, that their brain just fucking breaks. They have to get tough behind a keyboard and type out on their, you know, hateful shit, and then, you know, just a tweet saying, hey, this is just fact that, you know, The Last of Us won X amount of awards. But at the same time, too, you're seeing so many devs and so many, you know, creative directors and design directors and people of prominence within the development end of gaming at these exclusive studios start to become public figures on here, and you get to actually peek inside their lives, like Cory Barlog, the creative director behind God of War, one of the nicest human beings on in the world, on especially on the internet. he posts all the time about what he's playing. He's playing on PC, he's playing on Switch, he's playing on Xbox. Like, you're starting to see that almost from the inside, and that breaks some of these console war bullshitters' brains, that they're like, well, what? You make a PlayStation game, you're playing on an Xbox. Like, it's just, it boggles my mind that people can still think that. And it really stems back to, we're the generation now who has been gaming the longest at this point. Like, where we've had gaming right from the get-go, and prominent gaming that was of depth. Not that, NES games weren't, but really when we started to get into the Super Nintendo coming out in our age bracket, really that's whenever you're starting to see games evolve into, this is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, where this game isn't going to just, hey, you run through and it's a 2D sprite game that is, kind of super quick and you can beat it in 4 hours or something. No, it's like, there's like how many different dungeons, there's how many different boss battles you're going to have to go, like, and you're saving the game. Like, there's a reason why batteries were added to cartridges for saves, because these games started to get more in depth. So we've been gaming for such a long time that I think we grew up on that, hey, like, my parents bought me this, so I have to defend that choice. Like, my parents bought me an N64, not a PlayStation. So, well, yeah, the N64 is the best because I have it. Like, I got to justify being the kid without the PlayStation. Well, PlayStation doesn't have Zelda. Like, PlayStation doesn't have Mario. Like, you can't play it. Like, it stems...
Yeah, but it had Crash Bandicoot.
Right, exactly. But it stems from that whole, like, I think animosity stems from our generation being that, and really being the first generation that truly had multiple choices to go from. I mean, when you look at, even your brother's generation, who's now in his like mid 30s at this point, like, they grew up on really having at first only, for the most part, I mean, there was the Master System, but the NES was the primary gaming. That was like the sole thing. Everyone just referred to video games as Nintendo because of that. Like, they only had that option. So it just stems from that it's like, we're the first generation that had options to go off of, and your parents could get more than just one thing. They could walk into a store and somebody tell them, when they ask where the video games are, oh, do you mean Nintendo or Sega? Oh, do you mean Nintendo or PlayStation? Oh, do you mean Xbox or PlayStation? Like, there's so many choices that I think it stems from that. But the whole animosity thing, just, in my opinion, comes a lot from everything's amplified. The vocal minority is always amplified on Twitter in terms of the hateful bullshit. Because you'll see so many people, just as many people as you see on there that are spewing this bullshit. You'll also just see people being like, for example, to Corley Barlog, oh, dude, what are you playing on Xbox? And he'll respond. He talks to everybody on there. He'll be like, oh, I'm doing this. I can't believe, like, the Coalition did, I know we talked about Gears before. The Coalition did a great job with this. Like, they're all, people just think that, like, and we're starting to kind of see behind the curtain with game development, like I was talking about more and more now with, not just from social media, but documentaries and things are starting to come out, that you're starting to see the curtain pulled back. It's almost like, how the sausage is made with pro wrestling. Like, you learned, like, once Beyond the Mat came out back in the day, like, and people were like, oh shit, The Rock and Mankind are just talking to each other before Royal Rumble, before The Rock just fucking bust Mick's head open. What, they're friends? Like, what the hell? Like, Stone Cold and The Rock being buddy behind the scenes. Like, what the fuck? Like we're getting to that point where people are starting to see how the sausage is made, and they're like, oh, okay, so these people who make these games are actually people. Okay.
It's not just like, oh, it's Sony or Microsoft. Like, they're human beings behind the cover, and that's something that, like, I think society as a whole needs to do a much better job at. Regardless of your feelings of certain things, you have to realize that, like, no matter what, people are people. Like, yeah, you might go to a fast food place or a grocery store, and the employee might be a jerk to you, but you don't know how bad their day has been. Of course, like, I'm always someone who, like, I've worked in customer facing jobs pretty much all my life. I'm a people person. I think that, like, you kind of have to leave it. You have to leave some of the bullshit at home, right? When it comes to being a professional in certain aspects. But at the same time, it's important to note, you don't know how that person's day has been. But I think, like, you brought up a really good point, and I don't mean to kind of spearhead this conversation or T-bone it per se, but
go ahead.
I just thought you brought up a really good point, and I don't want to let the thought slip. Is, you're talking about my brother's generation. He just turned 35. 35 or 36 on the 21st. God, I can't remember. 1984 is his birthday. So
Mhm.
whatever that math is.
Mhm.
But, I remember as a kid, we had Nintendo. And then I remember, having Sega. And I remember, Spat and Rob having Super Nintendo because they
Mhm.
had Nintendos and they just stayed with Nintendo. But, my brother, we ended up getting Sega and
Mhm.
everything. And Rob and them also had a Sega a little bit later. But I remember, they had a, a SNES, and
Mhm.
the debate back then wasn't so much like SNES is better because X, Sega's better because of Y. The experiences were so different. And
Mhm.
I remember one of my first, memories growing up, one of my first memories with buying a video game is like, I mean, it doesn't even exist anymore, but I remember going to Kmart with my mom and asking, hey, I had played Mutant League Hockey from the local, like, from right by OP, like
Mhm.
family video, or not family video, whatever it was called, Homestead Video is what they called it.
Mhm.
And like I remember playing Mutant League Hockey for the first time, and they had Mutant League Football. And I remember I asked my mom if she'd buy it for me, and she did. And the person working was like, "Oh, like, is that a SNES, or is that a Super Nintendo game or a Sega game?" And I don't think it was even ever released on Super Nintendo, but like, that's the thing. That's something I remember. Like, that was the division. It wasn't, oh, Super Nintendo is so much better. It was just simply, which one are you playing on? And they didn't really
Mhm.
care, right? I
Mhm.
wish we kind of did that more as society with gaming, especially, is like, I just wish people didn't really ask, what console, like, we're getting closer to that point of not having to ask what console people play on with the crossplay stuff. I just wish that would just work its way out of the sphere, like out of the gaming sphere, basically.
I totally agree that, you get to that point where it's like we're starting to, and you brought up crossplay a little bit ago, we're starting to see that become such a bigger prominence with, how we're gaming and doing things together as a whole, that we're not building walls, we're building bridges. We're tearing those
Hmm.
walls down and building bridges between these consoles. Too soon, I think this utopian universal console that people always wonder, is it coming out? I think it's one just going to be, we're seeing more than ever, these new consoles that come out especially are just PCs. They're all just especially the Series X and the Series S to a degree, but specifically the Series S is just a gaming PC at this point. Like, and same with the PS5. It's pretty much a gaming PC at this point, that the tech is so similar. A lot of the architecture that both these consoles are built on, are so much easier to develop for comparative to their own intricate design philosophies within, like, the PS3 back in the day, and even the original Xbox and stuff like that. Like, now they're just universal consoles for the most part, and they're built within their own ecosystems, and that only helps development on both ends. But point being that we're building bridges instead, which I think is going to be good in the long term for this. But Mike, sticking with the same interview here, let's kick it over to Joe Scrabble's article over on IGN. Xbox could be an app on your TV within a year, says Phil Spencer. Like I said, this comes from Joe Scrubbles over on IGN. Same interview, but he has a nice write up on this, so we'll pull from there. As always, though, link in the description. Head of Xbox Phil Spencer says he thinks Xbox will release a smart TV app used to play games with no console required, quote, in the next 12 months. In an interview with The Verge's Decoder podcast, Spencer was asked what was stopping Microsoft from releasing Xbox as an app for smart TVs that met a minimum hardware specification. The answer, it seems, is nothing. Quote, I think you're going to see that in the next 12 months, replied Spencer. Or I think you're going to see that in the next 12 months, replied Spencer. Sorry. I don't think anything is going to stop us from doing that. Spencer doesn't go into any specifics on the Mooted app, but we previously heard that the Xbox exec discusses the idea of Xbox Streaming Sticks that could be used to game or stream games through xCloud after being plugged into the TV, a la like an Amazon Fire Stick. These could even be made part of the Xbox Game Pass subscription cost. It's not clear if Microsoft is considering which approach to take, or if it'll take both, allowing those with higher power TVs simply to download the app, and those without to use a plug-in solution. Spencer reiterated that he doesn't see streaming as the end of Microsoft's dedicated consoles, however, saying, quote, I don't think these will be the last big pieces of hardware that we ship. Instead, he sees the future of Xbox as a hybrid of built-in computing power and streaming. Quote, when we think about xCloud, which is our version of Google Stadia or Amazon Luna, I think what it needs to evolve to are games that actually run between a hybrid environment of the cloud and the local compute capabilities That was kind of a tongue twister there. Local compute capabilities, and that they can actually take full advantage of the cloud that's there and that's available, but also full advantage of my edge compute capability that I have in my home in the console. It's really a hybrid between those. He later continued, I don't think that the outcome is defined or is by definition going to be eventually everything becomes terminal server in my home and all my games are just completely running from the cloud. When we think about the evolution of our game platform, it's really more of a hybrid game platform between edge and cloud that we're shooting for. So it's kind of funny that this interview pops up, or this sect of the interview is kind of pops up, because as I said at the top of the show, I've been jumping back into The Witcher 3, which I've been playing via Steam on my PC. But I've also been utilizing at times the Steam Link app, which is on my my Sony Bravia 4K TV, has like a whole, I think it's just Android TV that's built into it, but it has an actual Steam Link app on it, which is akin to kind of what Phil Spencer's talking about to a degree. Which to be honest, I didn't even know TVs now, like I knew obviously apps on TVs, not that, but I didn't know that Steam for the longest time was supporting actual apps on TVs. I knew they did for Amazon Fire Stick, and I think that was the only one really that they had an app for that I tried getting on there. It didn't really run that well, but I didn't realize it actually had one built in. Now they were doing it for smart TVs directly. I thought you would have to still do, via a Steam Link box or something that they discontinued, but I digress. Surprisingly, it runs pretty fucking great, which granted, it's a remote play option compared to xCloud being ran off of dedicated servers. It's a private connection that mine's running off of. But the point is that this isn't some groundbreaking, real new idea. With the incredible infrastructure that Microsoft has for streaming, kind of having an app like this is pretty fucking impactful. Like, and I've talked about it before, any experience I've had with xCloud, whether it was beta testing it back in the day, being in the early preview builds and stuff, it's been fucking incredible. It's been absolutely incredible. Nothing beats Azure servers from Microsoft. I mean, they have them and Google really are the two who would have the not only technology but money to back it up, but specifically Microsoft, I think, edges out easily in that conversation on that end. So, Mike, how do you think a service like this gets rolled out from Microsoft? Is it just straight up, Game Pass, or a combination of Game Pass and remote play? Does the reported streaming stick still make, that the most long-term sense for streaming via your TV compared to a smart TV app? Do you think that, this gaming stick that they keep talking about, this, a Xbox version of an Amazon Fire Stick, is probably the most logical in the long term? How do you think they're just going to tackle all of this?
Yeah, I think, this is something that when you look at some of their, planning for what Microsoft was planning to do, with this next generation, I think this is something that you were really like big on basically predicting in a way. Basically, you were saying that at some point, is it even going to be worth for Microsoft to bother making consoles because they're more worried about the service? And this definitely feels like a shift to the service. I'm curious to see how it would be executed. If it's just like solely going to be like you don't even have to own an Xbox console at all and it'll still run the games, that's something really interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
The plausibility and the possibility of that. I am interested, in that in particular, because it would make sense, like if you had to have an Xbox, like a home base that you would just like use as the powerhouse to like stream off of, kind of like the Steam Link that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I don't know where to go from there with that prediction. But to me, I'm like just kind of inspecting this and saying like, yeah, this all kind of makes sense. This is kind of what Microsoft has been positioning for. They want to just have players simply playing on their system. They don't really care if you have an Xbox at the end of the day. They just want you playing on cloud or whatever. I could see it being something where you would have to own the console because it would be the workhorse, much like Steam Link. But if they have it to where you only need a PC basically to have Xbox, I would think you would either have to have a PC or Xbox to do this, is where I would see it going. I don't see it being something that would stand alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the one thing I will say about for example, and I'm just going to use the Steam Link app for an example, just because I have the most experience using that in terms of streaming to my TV. I mean, I've done trying to think what did I stream before? Oh, I've done like PlayStation Now before, and that just is fucking god awful. And admittedly, I think all PlayStation fans find that god awful. Now you could download some games now, but like I wanted to replay before for some reason I couldn't find my disc to Red Dead Redemption, the first one before, and I wanted to replay it before Red Dead 2 came out a couple years ago, and I remember trying to stream it via PlayStation Now on my PS4, and it was just absolutely awful. Even with a wired connection, good, decent up and down, connection, and it was horrible. But I will say the one thing with game streaming in terms of like, for example, with the Steam Link, which I've had great success with at times, but there have been hiccups with. I know my connection's good. I'm getting a good connection. Like I go and test my PC, and it's like even even going off of a Wi-Fi connection, it's still like you're only getting a fraction of what you do from a hardline connection, but like our hardline connection is like 1,000 down. So like, I shouldn't worry about too much, but even Wi-Fi, it's like, even if we're getting half that, that's still fucking great. But point being with the Wi-Fi, I do agree that it's a lot of people probably aren't going to do a wired connection. I used to have a wired connection to our TV before we moved. Now just with where our modem and router are, it's a little harder to do that. Being on different floors and stuff like that. But yeah, it's there are times where hiccups come into it where I personally see, like you were saying, more so on PC or even on console. Like they've talked about that eventually, and we even have kind of said, I think the most logical thing for the advancement of the Series S long term is the ability to stream xCloud games onto there, being able to basically have that as a streaming box, almost like a Steam Link box, how they used to be, except for obviously them being a private connection, being just streaming from your computer to this box on the TV and being kind of a conduit for that. But this more so being, hey, you're basically playing, hey, you have your Series S, but it's playing a game at a Series X level, but it's streaming, so you got to make sure your internet's good, yada yada. But I see that becoming a more long-term plausible thing. I could see the stick, like the streaming stick, being the big thing. I totally see the app at the same time being totally fine too, because even if it isn't the main thing, it's still, there are a ton of people who now have smart TVs that it may not be the main way that people play xCloud games, but hey, I mean, if they could do it easily, if they have the ability to just port that app over that could be made on that streaming stick, or even from their Series S or the Series S, they're eventually going to make it for, I'm sure, or PC or whatever. They're basically just porting this app that I'm sure could be easily transferred over. That why not just put it on there? If it affects a handful of people, cool. They at least have it. That could potentially be a couple more people we get on subscribers for next to nothing putting that out there. So, but I agree. I definitely see it long term being more of a thing on PC, being more of a, this thing that people invest in through Game Pass on PC, through, even Game Pass on console where, hey, I bought, this affects the people. Hey, I'm playing a lot of stuff on my, from Game Pass on my souped up gaming PC. But, I want to go and play stuff on my TV at times. I want to take that game with me, but I really don't want to spend $500 on a Series X. Cool, I'll buy, a Series S or whatever for $300, and I'll just stream the stuff from there. I'll just stream my games that I'm getting in, on my beefy PC that's putting out 4K 60 or whatever. Like, cool, I'll do that to my TV. So I'm totally with you that I totally see that becoming the centerpiece for all of this. But
it also feels like they might be doing, like, it seems like Xbox or Microsoft is kind of gearing up for a world where they are trying to drive console sales and they're trying to drive console sales, and they're trying to drive the sales of like the Xbox Game Pass. Like, instead of, oh, I have a console and I would like to get access to all these games and play my console or play my games wherever, it seems like they might be trying to go the other way to generate demand by ease of access type thing. You know what I mean? Which is definitely an interesting way to go. And I'm really curious to see how it works out for them, because it definitely seems like that is their game plan going forward, is to kind of get people in the Xbox ecosystem by any means necessary. And in this case, it definitely seems like they're just trying to generate interest by making it easy to play their games wherever you want.
No, definitely. And I think that plays into that plays into Microsoft's just whole philosophy and attack, I guess, if you want to say, for this next generation is just accessibility. It just goes into like all they want is, with Game Pass on PC, with xCloud, with everything. Like, you don't need to own an Xbox console to get into Xbox's ecosystem. Now, if you have a smartphone, you can get in. It's at that point, it's going to be one of those things. It's just like, yeah, it's just another way to cast the net a little bit wider, and pull more people in. And if they could do it at a super small, I'm sure it's, I don't want to speak out of turn, but from what it sounds like, a relatively easy process to port this app that I'm sure they're working on. And Phil even saying we're probably gonna see it in the next 12 months. If they could port this app to multiple different devices, why the hell not? I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, if it's minimal work for them overall to do, different ports of this app, fuck it, why not? If it's just casting the net a little wider to get people in, cool, awesome. So, it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited to see where this whole streaming process goes, because I've grown more and more open to streaming long term. I've always been more of a analog type of person. I like my traditional, whether I'm playing on PC or my console or whatever. Like I don't want to worry about a connection. I don't want to worry about anything dropping or my performance not being up to par or whatever from what I paid for. Like, I'd rather just have a straight hardline. Like, I hate Wi-Fi connections to begin with. Like, I
mean, they're terrible.
Right, I hardline everything into my computer, like, or our house if I can. But like I was saying, it's right now it's not as easy to do that with our TV that's down in our living room and my modem being up in my quote unquote office where all my nerdy shit is. So, it's stuff like that it's. I just would rather have this hard line connection. But at the same time, though, I'm starting to open up to it more and more, where I'm trying to use it in more different cases that do pop up. Like me playing The Witcher, like, I have the Steam Link app on my TV. Fuck, I maybe I don't feel like sitting in my computer chair all night. Like, I want to lay on the couch and just play some of that, or play Rocket League or whatever, or just play whatever. The fun fact about that: the Steam Link app, you are able to remote play fucking Counter-Strike on that. Imagine fucking trying that.
I mean, hey man, to each their own. I would definitely wouldn't do it. But
no.
I think you make really good points about like the hardline thing, and that's one thing I'm looking into with the townhouse in Virginia is like I have access to FiOS through Comcast and Verizon, when I was down there, I was getting like 900 down, 960 down, and like 600 up, and I think I have a FiOS. I kind of have like, there's a couple of different technologies when it comes to FiOS, and I think in our neighborhood in particular, we kind of have the older school FiOS, which means there's FiOS run to the entire neighborhood, like the entire townhome community, and everyone kind of shares off the same FiOS. So that's why my speeds aren't like a gig for each to me, period, but the speeds are still really good. So the update I'm looking to make to our townhouse is FiOS is great, and if you buy expensive modem and router like a Nighthawk, like the Wi-Fi is going to be terrific. But alternatively, I think it's something to look into when you live in an area like this in particular, and with how popular online schooling is becoming with Zoom and everything. I think it's something that I'm going to look to make basically like Ethernet adapters into the walls. So instead of like phone lines, like I'm going to have an Ethernet adapter plug into a switch that like you can plug your modem into, and that way in every room there's a hard wire. That way you don't have to be running wires through the walls or whatever. Like that part's already going to be done. You know what I mean? Because I think, like I said, gig internet is great wireless, but it's even better, the way it's intended with hard wires.
No, 100%, and I totally agree. Like, it's funny you say that. Like, that's my one. Like it sucks that like right now we're renting our townhouse. Like, hopefully, we buy something within the next couple years. But that's the one downfall for everything with renting. It's like, there's so many things I want to do that like I want to do exactly what you're saying. I thought of that before, like actually basically building like a switch into our wall for the most part that we can then run and replace our phone lines, like you were saying, with actual ports, Ethernet ports on there, so we can just plug stuff into. Like, that would make life so much easier. But I do want to try out those. They have those built-in ones. They're like kind of the like home like quick fix type thing for that, where you can get it, like, plug it in, basically. You can get, like, adapters to plug into the wall for that I've never tried them before. I heard they work okay. But at the same time, like, I also don't want to spend $50 to, like, not really get anything out of it, and, like, it'd be like meh. Like, I'd rather just be like, okay, I'll just wait type of thing and deal with it. But I digress. Mike, let's head into our last topic for this week, and this one kind of slipped by me. Whenever they announced the nominees for the Game Awards, I was listening to it and whatnot and pulled it up, and pay attention to it, but it literally happened like not long before the show started. I totally blanked on adding it to the run of show last week, but it was mostly for a conversation I wanted to kind of have around it. But let's first start out with the nominees. Obviously, this is going to cover every console manufacturer and whatnot that had games put on it. That could be exclusives for PlayStation, Nintendo, or whatever. But after that, there's more so, after I run through this article, just to kind of set the stage, there's more of a conversation I want to have about the process behind this. So, like I said, let's kick it off, just kind of set the table for this. The Game Awards 2020 nominees have been announced. It's coming from Jeremy Winslow over on GameSpot. As always, link in the description. The Game Awards, which will be live streamed on December 10th, has unveiled the list of game nominations for categories like Best Game Direction, Best Narrative, Best Art Direction, and the much coveted Game of the Year. Let's see here. Naughty Dog's Last of Us Part 2 leads the pack with 10 awards, including a spot on the Game of the Year list. Other contenders for the coveted award are Animal Crossing New Horizons, 3 nominations, Doom Eternal, 4 nominations, Final Fantasy VII Remake, 6 nominations, Ghost of Tsushima, 7 nominations, and Hades, 8 nominations, which is great to see. 4 of the 5 aforementioned games also land on Best Game Direction list alongside Half-Life Alyx. Additionally, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, and The Last of Us Part 2 appear on the Best Narrative list next to 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. The same 4 games, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, and The Last of Us Part 2, also compete for the Best Art Direction award against Ori, Will the Wisp, hell yeah. Breakout and popular elimination platformer Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. We got Fallout, Fall Guys. It's all the same thing.
I think the Fallout boys might have aged to guys at this point.
Yes, I agree. They did. Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout also got some love, showing up in 4 of the 30 categories. This includes the best multiplayer list, which is comprised of Among Us, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Call of Duty Warzone, and Valorant. So, like I said, I forgot to bring this up last week for some fucking reason. But with the Game Awards season here, it's interesting to kind of, always look back and really see, how some of these releases pan out. I mean, even how pretty soon we're going to have our Game of the Year, awards, or whatever you want to call it, our episode that revolves around Game of the Year and some of the other nominations that we have. So it's crazy to kind of think about it, because 2020 has been a fucking shit show. And the fact that we're already in November after it feeling like March was like 2 weeks ago, has been kind of crazy. So it is really cool. I love this time of year where we kind of get to look back and just all the dope shit that people put out and what we played that we loved. Even if it isn't stuff that has just come out this year, it's great to kind of just reminisce about stuff that's come out. But, it's really, it does suck, kind of on Microsoft's end. There weren't really too many standouts, but, Ori getting in there, hopefully getting its time in the sun for the few nominations that it did get, that's great. But my question, and the question of a lot of people, always seems to come back to is, why the fuck is the Game Awards in December compared to January? For example, the conversation now has been around Cyberpunk, granted, getting delayed and not really, that's not fucking Jeff Keighley's fault or anything like that. But because he's got a plan that as somebody who works in event, in game and event ops and management, things like that, in planning large scale events, like, this isn't something you throw together a month down the road. It's like, this is a full calendar year in advance, if not more, that we're planning for this. For example, like when we've hosted through my work, like in working in college athletics, we've hosted the NCAA first and second rounds of the men's basketball tournament before. That shit is known years in advance. And we start planning that like a year and a half in advance at the latest. Like it is, we are far ahead of the game. And, and this is just, granted, this is one event, but Jeff does this every year. And after that rolls, like he takes one day off maybe, and then he's back to planning this shit for the next year, like the day after. So it is a large scale event. So it's hard to, it's hard to go off of one game, but we do have to look at, massive titles like Cyberpunk 2077, one of these games that is looking to potentially push the medium forward and push open world games in general forward. That's missing the entry for the mark this year. And it's, a game that is still coming out in 2020. This is 2020's, out of all the games that have come out this year, all of the critically acclaimed and blockbuster games that have come out this year, that is a lot of people's still easily biggest game of 2020 to still come out, or to come out in general this year, and hell, even the generation. It was looked at this, big cap to kind of usher us into the next gen, and it's still a 2020 game. That not being included in the 2020 Game Awards. And even, like, for example, because that's going to fall into the same category as Jedi Fallen Order from last year, where it just missed the mark for the cutoff for nominees and was bumped to, next year. And it's gotten some nominees, which rightfully so, even though compared to 2020 Game of the Years, I don't think it, as much as I adored that game, I don't think it really holds a candle to some of the games that were, announced. But point being, that game came out in November of 2019, and it's being now considered for this year. Like, it's lost that steam, it's lost that momentum that it came out. In Cyberpunk, hopefully, that game, I think, stands a little taller than a lot of other games, or at least is planned to be. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But it's probably the biggest example to date that this format leaves fans a little put off, and leaves, I'm sure, developers a little put off. But, and granted, I think we have to say this: the Game Awards aren't the end all be all by any means, and it's even arguable that you could say the DICE Awards and things like that, where it's actually developers voting on this and peers voting on this. It's almost like the Ted Lindsay in the NHL, where it's like that's voted on by your peers. That may sometimes speak volumes to more than anything else. But the Game
I think
Awards,
it's a bigger deal than like the Heart.
I totally agree. Me personally, and I'm with you too. Like, I agree with that. But obviously the Game Awards doesn't have any necessarily. I don't want to say it's a popular contest or anything like that. Or, whether these games are popular among fans or anything. It does kind of have that ring to it, but at the same time, like, I do agree that Jeff Keighley's trying to make this a legitimate. It's trying to make it the Oscars for the games, and I totally agree, because granted, yeah, right now it is kind of, okay, whoever has the largest voice out there kind of pushes that. They do get a little more kick than some of these independent games that have, maybe done some bigger things within the industry than some of these other games. But we got to start somewhere with this. So, but this still kind of is the biggest issue for a lot of things, because it does kind of cut it close for the people who do vote on these games, the critics who do vote on these nominations to get them nominated, that if they're cut out in November, then what? So, like, Mike, do you think this format could potentially hurt the integrity of the Game Awards one day? As it's evolving, as it's starting to make progress to be this centerpiece of, gaming prestige, do you think it could potentially hurt the integrity of this one day if Jeff Keighley doesn't necessarily evolve this, model, I guess, that he has?
Yeah, I think it would make a whole lot of sense for it to kind of be pushed back to January to include the games in December. I know, like, for calendar year purposes, technically a game released in January couldn't be the game of the year if there's a game released in January, it couldn't be included with game of the year. But why wouldn't you at least include games up until December 31st, right? Like, that would make a lot more sense to me than, having the cutoff be earlier. And that way, Cyberpunk might be considered for 2021. I think, it would be worthwhile to include every game up until the 31st and have this awards show in January, because then it would include all of the, all the holiday season games for this year. Whether or not, a game is considered game of the year, I think whenever you kind of take fan voting out of it in a way like this would be, I think you can kind of retain integrity, because, people who do this for, from a media standpoint, are going to go back and look at Cyberpunk for next year's game of the year, kind of potentially with, it's hard to say that they would do it without bias because when something happened so long ago, it would be easy to say, oh, so much has changed since that game was released. How could it be considered game of the year?
Hmm.
Well, it's not really fair because it was released in the year that it's in the time frame you're looking for to be considered for game of the year, right? So I do think it's worth a look to see if there could be something done that could be better for this entire industry. But I don't think it'll lose integrity because I think the media will. I do think it can be corrupt for a lot of different reasons. I don't think the time frame can be one though.
Hmm. I do
If
agree.
that makes any sense,
No,
I
no,
don't
no.
know.
I do agree. Now, yeah, definitely. What you were saying, like, I definitely agree that it could be a little hyperbolic. Me saying, oh, could this potentially hurt the integrity of it? Because that's realistically, it is probably if. And Jeff's a guy who has been around the block forever and is one of the most prominent people in gaming media, for sure, and one of the most well respected, and is very transparent with everything he does. And I respect the hell out of him for that. So he's always takes fan feedback. He's always answering people too. Like he throw hey, what did you guys like about the Game Awards this year? What did you dislike? I want every feedback, and he'll take it all in. And he'll respond to people on Twitter and be like, oh, that's interesting. I never really thought of that, or something like that. So this to me is an easy fix eventually, but you got to look at this year. And granted, like I said, he's not planning this around. He's not planning his award show around games, potentially getting bumped or anything like that.
Hmm.
Like he can't do that, and that's somebody speaking from both, an event standpoint who works in events and game ops and things like that, like who's around event management things like that, but also speaking just like in general as somebody who is, who has now has a little bit of a foothold in the media side doing the show and writing and things like that, that you can't plan around. Like he knows how game development works. Anything could happen. Like it is what it is. It bumps out, but you got to look at it this year where it's like the Game Awards is live the same day that Cyberpunk 2077 launches.
Yeah.
So it's a little, kind of, I'm sure CD Projekt Red, kind of biting, gritting their teeth and pushing through it. It is what it is type of thing. And I think this game is going to be big enough, strong enough to push past that potential, it's going to go by the wayside or something like that for next year. Because I think people are going to be talking about this game for a long, long time. But at the same time, too, it's obviously going to be most impactful at launch. It's going to be that game that it's going to have the most steam right out the gate, right out the the conductor's going to have the most steam going right off the bat to get this thing moving, and that's where it's going to have the most hype. And I do kind of worry that maybe it doesn't win as many awards as it should be, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter. But if we're moving this to try to be the Oscars of gaming, if we're moving to try to make this legitimize gaming as this entertainment form, which it doesn't need to be, but I think it already is legitimized and doesn't need more legitimizing. But point being, if we're trying to bring this, bigger and bigger, to me, I think it only makes sense to, even if it is like, okay, we know games who are probably going to be recognized within the space aren't going to come out after, December 15th or even like December 25th. Like, okay, if you want to even keep it within there, just in case, whatever. But me personally, I think the cutoff, I'm with you. I think the cutoff should be somewhere around December 31st, where you're getting a catch-all of everything. And, hey, votes have to be in by Christmas or something like that and we're going to, announce the winners January 1st, shows on February 1st. So then you have the whole year that it's like, okay, all these games that we talked about, here they come. Here's what encapsulates 2020. And this is, everything in gaming that was great and deserves to be awarded. Not, because being honest, you look at, now granted, schedules have expanded over the years and whatnot. We're having prominent games come out in, April, May, June, and hell, we're having prominent games come out 12 months a year now. But we're seeing, traditionally, it's your, September to, November-ish, time frame. You're Q3, Q4 games, they're going to be your huge heavy hitters because they want to get them out to do the most sales around Christmas and stuff. They're around holidays. They're trying to get those holiday sales. That's when you see the most games come out, and that's where this line is kind of getting blurry. Of how do we cross this? How do we make this? To get the game. I get he wants to encompass. I get he wants to make sure. He wants this to be a celebration of 2020, and he wants to keep it 2020 and be in 2020. I get that to an extent. But the Oscars have done this for how long? The Academy Awards have been done in, the first month or two of the next year or the following year for how long? So they can get a catch-all of everything. So I think eventually we're going to get to that point. I don't think it'll necessarily hurt it, but I think it would be doing right by the devs probably, and doing right by the people who are making this to get them that credit that they probably deserve, when they do deserve it, I guess, right away, like where they're not waiting a full year to kind of get this game to have its, time in the sun. But I guess to a degree, Cyberpunk 2077, we might need a fucking year to play this game. Like, it's so fucking big. So, from what it sounds like, so that might actually help. But I digress. I don't think it's the end of the world stuff, but like, I think it's just one of those growing pains that comes with this. While Jeff's trying to make this, it's only he's only been doing this since what 2013 or 14, I think. So it's less than a decade old. I mean, hell, we've only hit the 5-year mark here relatively soon. So it's like, it's ever evolving, it's ever changing. It's only going to get better as it goes on. It's only going to get more legitimate as it goes on with somebody like Jeff Keighley running this, who is such this prominent figure in gaming and such a well-respected figure in gaming, and has these connections that I think really, it's only going to get better. So it's just a learning curve. It's a bump along the way that he'll figure it out, and he'll make the right decisions, and he'll work with people. He's open, he's transparent. So, Mike, before we wrap up the show this week, let's head into Party Chat. And if you're new to the show, Party Chat's where we propose one question at the end of the show each week that we want to just discuss with you. Could be as simple as, what's your favorite story beat of a game, and what have you been playing during quarantine? Or it could be a little in depth as to why the negative stigma around gaming still exists. And after answering it ourselves, we'll kick it over to you to tweet your responses. To the question over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast, and we'll read some of the responses the following week, like the responses from last week's question, which was, by holiday 2021, how many Xbox first-party exclusive titles will be announced? Doesn't mean released, but announced in an official capacity, whether it's just, Bethesda being like, hey, we're making a new Fallout game. Not necessarily Fallout 5, but it's just, hey, it's announced. We officially say we're working on it type of thing. And Carter A emailed us in saying he said 17, but hopefully more now that Bethesda will officially be in the fold, which I agree. That's going to really be interesting to see how a lot of these, inside Xbox events and, things like that manifest with having such a prominent figure like Bethesda in the fold. Now that they'll be able to officially talk about them in an official capacity next year. So, Mike, this week's question, will we ever see VR on both console and PC truly get past its gimmick phase and into a more common form of gaming? And just kind of setting the stage, like, we both, like, I have PSVR. We both have played it before, playing experiences that were incredible, like Resident Evil 7 and stuff that is so immersive and, things like that. But there's so many things that do hold VR back, like a lot of VR, a lot of VR headsets right now have that screen door effect to it, have the, a lot of wires attached to it or stuff like that. Will we ever see VR on both, and we're talking in a console format, but also PC format, truly get past its gimmick phase of this, hey, it's just a cool little add-on type of thing, into a more common form of gaming that people are saying, oh yeah, I play a lot of VR mostly?
That's definitely an interesting question, and it's one that is tough to answer, just simply because I think it's pretty cool right now, personally, but I don't have any issues. I don't get the headaches. I don't get motion sickness. I get motion sickness with basically like fucking everything else, but that's one thing that doesn't bother me, and I don't know why. I think VR is in a spot where, technologically speaking, I think it's kind of hitting its ceiling, and it's something that will eventually, begin to get better and better over time. But I think one thing to kind of think about when you look at VR's plausibility as a gaming, experience, is how quickly we can get free of those wires and free of all that type of stuff. And the constraints of your home also being an issue. You know, if you have a
Mhm.
tight space and you can't move around a lot, it can kind of limit what availability you have from a VR standpoint. Will it ever get to the point where you're an actual soldier virtually and have a completely totally virtual experience? I mean, I would imagine at some point down way down the road, but I think going forward, I think within the next 5, 10 years is still going to be in the gimmick phase that it's in now.
No, I totally agree that in you bringing up the ceiling aspect of VR, I totally agree that right now consumer level VR is, I think, at really its crux right now of what it's able to do with the current technology we have. Now, granted, PCs, it doesn't seem like 8K is that far off. Consoles, I mean, hell, both next gen consoles are now able to upscale to 8K when it's eventually available. Now, how well they run that, who knows? But point being that they are slowly getting to the point of power that they're going to be able to do a lot of these things. Like, I'm really interested in getting a Oculus Quest 2 or just an Oculus Quest in general because it's the first wireless VR headset. Now, granted, it doesn't have the fidelity that the actual Rifts do or anything like that, but at the same time, like, all you have to do is plug one wire into your PC to be able to play any Oculus Rift game.
Hmm.
So to me, that's the biggest thing about like having PSVR and even seeing how Sony's handling VR into this next generation. Right now, they're like, we don't have any plans to put out, any PSVR games right now, really. But we'll give you a free adapter that you can plug, that will work. Your PSVR headset will work with a PS5. All you have to do is send in for this free, adapter for that. But they're slowly kind of moving away from VR. Now, granted, I think they'll eventually do another VR helmet or a headset, but I don't think it's necessarily like a year down the road, personally. But I think we're at that position where it's like, people don't want to have to deal with the wires. People don't want to have to deal with the 10 minutes it takes to set up a thing. Then, oh shit, like this game I'm playing, I'm getting motion sickness, yada yada. But you bring up a good point about space too. Like that was always the biggest thing for me too. Like, right, we have a decent amount of space in this townhouse, but at the same time, that's a ton of wires to pull out. That's a ton to just set up and actually sit down and play a game and do that. Where at least with a Quest, like in my mindset, cool, I want to eventually play Half-Life Alyx. At least I don't have to worry about it. It's literally one plug. I just plug it in, it's good. There's one little wire that's running around. Okay, cool. But outside of that, even still, it's like, okay, you can only do so much with these games. It's a lot of, teleporting around. They're only half-baked experiences. Half of them, a lot of them still are just your almost tech demos in a way, but there are more games that are coming out that are getting a little bit deeper. I mean, I think we were spoiled with Resident Evil 7 off the bat, with how just unique of an experience that was, playing the whole game, an actual version of the game, like the full game in VR, compared to games like, Doom, VFR or something like that, where it's a, a piecemeal together portion of the game, almost like a
Hmm.
highlight reel of it. So I'm kind of with you. I think we're just at the ceiling point right now, and VR needs to be able to find a way to evolve with the technology we have right now in a way that is open to consumers. That consumers aren't looking at it as just this, you know, ancillary type of thing where, hey, I feel okay spending an extra $300 on something meaningful that I'm going to play on a daily basis, where right now I just don't think it is. So, Mike, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you on the interwebs to talk about all the dope video game shit we talked about today? Like, is Xbox going to eventually come to streaming platforms? Are we, basically saying also that console wars are bullshit, game awards, all that jazz, everything we talked about. Where can people find you on the interwebs to talk about all the nerdy video game news they needed to know this week?
You can find me on Twitter at TOYSXLDIER. That is Toy Soldier with an X for the second O. Or you can find me on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier.
Nice, nice. And as always, I'm your host, Travis Wade, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including Twitter at Traveless_. That's TRAVLESS_. You could also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Traveless_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some video games with me on Xbox Live from really any platform at this point, you can just find me at just regular old Traveless on all of them. That's TRAVLESS, no underscore whatsoever. So, and with that being said, This has been your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversations around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz wherever you get a podcast at, and follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways like our Cyberpunk 2077 giveaway, which is coming up very soon. We're going to be pulling a winner for that, so fucking get on it. Right down in the description. Just look, scroll down wherever you're whether you're on YouTube right now watching this, which, well, I guess listening to it. You get the point. YouTube, if you're on fucking Spotify, whatever, just scroll down just a little bit. Click the description thing. It's right there. Just click that link, follow the directions, boom. You could potentially win a copy of Cyberpunk 2077 on our dime, not yours. Which you better fucking do, because I don't want to spend this money on this game and nobody win it. Well, actually, then, technically, one of us gets to play it. So, if you don't want to, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, if you don't want to save $60,
you
I
don't want
can't
to save
hold a gun
$60.
to your head.
Yeah, God forbid we buy somebody a game. With that being said, Mike, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening, sharing, and being part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors, Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.